Hello, everybody, and welcome to One Day Today. We are already on episode 39, and they're coming quick. This is we know we started this in the midst of COVID. Originally One Day was to be a festival in Nashville, Tennessee, this year, and the world obviously twisted off its axis. But we're still going strong with this virtual stage because it's been in a beautiful for me. It's been beautiful to really just hear people's story and hear really as different as our conversations are when we say different, different races, different ethnicities, different religions, different perspectives, different vantage points. It always comes back to the same, you know, facing of something inside themselves. Every person has a different story, but they always have to face something within themselves and experience something within themselves that they see that's bigger on the other side of that. And we hold this space to really give people a space to share their gifts, share the gifts that they are. And I'm really excited about the two guests we have today. We were just kind of talking about before the show here. We were talking about the new paradigm, and the opportunity that we have in the world right now. And for me, I see what's opening up is an abundance of opportunity and openings for a new conversation. I don't want to have the survival conversation. My intention is to ask what's possible. What's possible in an ever connected world when every person's unique contributions and gifts are valued, and magnified through collaboration. What would it feel like to experience adults and children of every color and every creed playing, singing, laughing, dancing, creating together in a global sandbox? How high will humanity rise when we intentionally choose to make peace louder than fear and hate? That's what this space is. We dare ask what's possible. We say hello to Matthew, our co-host. Matthew, how's it going today, brother?
Doing pretty good, brother man. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. It's a big, beautiful world in my eyes. I'm seeing so many things, just so many beautiful people that I keep stumbling across, and I'm very excited about the future. With this organization, we're about to unfold a lot of amazing things. We have we're going to start introducing our board of directors who have been starting taking on some amazing work. But very soon we're going to make some public announcements, and I'm really looking forward to really sharing with the world, what this movement's about, and how everybody can really, be a leader and express themselves and be a part of it and share what they're already up to, and shine and attract people who are already doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work in the background. And like it's funny, the whole leadership thing. I still get a laugh sometimes. And I only laugh because if I didn't, I'd probably be so angry I'd cried. At how much people seem to still want to be led instead of finding that sovereignty within themselves. And that's something that it seems like one of those human wide lessons, like we've got the interpersonal lessons, we've got the neighborhood lessons and the family lessons and the city lessons, and this is one of those that seems like it's humanity's lesson as a whole. Like, what is it that we're learning in learning to be self-sovereign? And I love a lot of what we get to do here because we get to open up questions like that and bring in people who have had experiences where they fell into their own sovereignty and they lead their own lives and they don't rely on outside thought or opinion or worry about what other people care about what they look like or how they think or what they do or what they say. They're just their own being and they're living their life the way they really feel drawn to live it. And I love that part of the show. Like I love
Mm.
all of this, but like that aspect in particular is probably one that really draws me here the most. And so I I have a feeling that like today we're going to have some fairly interesting conversations, maybe around that, maybe things touching to that, just from what we were talking about backstage. And, you know, this paradigm shift that we're talking about, it doesn't seem like it's one that's going to happen instantaneously. And yet it seems like it already has happened.
Mm,
If that makes any sense, it's just a question of where each person decides to look,
mm.
both internally and externally. And I don't know. It's just it's fun to be here in that and watch that change, and be here with you in that.
I appreciate you saying all that, and kind of what you're saying about leadership and self sovereignty. It kind of points me to, it's like I've been guilty of that, where it's like when's somebody gonna when's someone gonna lead us to like have a world where we can actually get along? When's someone gonna do this? Like to confront the things that are in their way, or be authentic. And it's like when it's like waiting for someone else to do what we want and have the ability and wherewithal to do right now with our word, with our
Our intention.
intentions and our attention. And that's what's beautiful, and that's what this movement has been a lightning rod for just beautiful people who are doing just that. And I'm on that note, I'm going to introduce our first guest. I'm really excited. We have Joe Atalig.
Joe, welcome
How's
to
it going,
stage.
Joe?
Hey guys, thank you
Hey,
for having me. Excited to be with you both today.
We
absolutely,
are
man. Glad to
so
have you
excited.
here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just have at it. I'm really excited to hear you share, Joe. So I'm just gonna let you have the stage. So
All
if
right.
it's all right with you, Joe, the stage is yours.
All right. Appreciate it so much. All right. So I guess the best way to start today is to share a little bit about my journey. Once, not too long ago, I was looking for something new to know and to believe in. So I studied the charts and I followed the moon, hoping it would see me through all my gloom. I was dreaming. Though in order for me to see the light, I had to learn to do things right for my living. So I gave myself a change of mind, and now I see that I was blind and deceiving myself. Now, some people, they don't understand all this love shit. It's all a scam. I felt criticized, ostracized, and extremely sad. But all I know is it's the best feeling I've ever had. The feeling of being bold, brilliant, and unabashedly free because I decided to love my own essence and be fully seen. You mean show the mess, the hurt, the pain, and the tears in a world where men are not to show any fear? All right, so I'll put on a happy face, positivity, and be known for he's so nice. But let me tell you about hiding and pretending and how I paid the price. My body, my health, my confidence and self-worth, my marriage, my work, my children. It felt like I was cursed. But hold on, don't worry about me. I'm far from a victim. My story is good because I woke up from the slumber and questioned things I thought I understood. So what does love got to do with it? As Tina Turner would ask, do you mean forgiving, releasing, surrendering, shit like that? That's a tall order to ask. But I suppose it's not when I face the truth, the ugly truth, the beautiful truth, the tough truth, the painful truth, the undeniable truth, the truth that sets you free. You see, I made a contract with myself, and it is this. I am an honest, accepting, courageous man, committed to expressing my true self now. But as we often do, wonder how do I expose myself with the risk that they'll say he's a fraud? But that's not my responsibility, is it? They are not my God. You see, I opened up to love, true love, real love, the highest love, the widest love, the greatest love, the deepest love, agape love. And that's where I discovered that as I peeled away the things that I thought were my identity, were really an illusion of the authentic me. My name, my culture, my religion, family, and belief systems given to me at birth. actually stood in the way of understanding my true worth. I knew that I am not my thoughts. I am not my culture. I am not my mistakes. I am not what my family did. I am not what others say I am. I am not my circumstances, and I am not my big ass title. I am not the balance in my bank account, and thank God I am not my hair. And I'm definitely not your expectations. I am the image and the likeness of God, and God is love. Therefore, my true self is love. That's right. I am love. I am giving. I'm abundant. I am accepted. I am worthy now. Not if, not when. I am worthy of love right this minute as is. And I have 2 daughters, and they know the darkest parts of me. And with love and acceptance they have given me, I can say when I look in their eyes, I'm fully known and still loved by you. You won't let go, no matter what I do. It's not one or the other. It's hard truth and ridiculous grace to be known, fully known, and loved by you. Take off the mask. Face the truth. Open up to love. Receive love. Be led by love. Be coached by love. Starting with yourself. Fully accepting of what is. Be bold and be brave, because that, my friends, is how we start a love wave. Thank you again. My name is Joe Atalig, and I'm really honored and privileged to share this stage with Abram and Matthew, and who you'll meet later today, Kevin. And, you know, what I've learned is that, and what I believe is that when you choose to have an unconditional commitment to the well-being of another, it's one of the greatest decisions you'll ever make. But the caveat, though, is that that commitment to the well-being of another, it starts within ourselves. You see, I regularly work with people that have consciously pressed the reset button in an unfulfilled area of the life. And here's what I've discovered, is that the root cause of their stuckness is it's rooted in fear. But people often believe that fear is the opposite of love. And I would argue that fear is actually the absence of love. And how do I know this? Is because I consciously pressed the reset button in my own life, because I believe that I could maintain the facade that I had my shit together. I had it all. A wife, 2 kids, 3 houses, senior vice president in my corporate job, money in the bank, investments doing well, amazing credit rating, serving in ministry, and living in one of the safest communities in the country. So why was I so miserable and deep inside? It's because I had a conditional commitment to my own well-being, because my existence was predicated on how my life looked to others. I had officially joined like the unofficial looking good club that many of us join unconsciously. Now, come on, right? We know it's all about fitting in, right? Keep up with the Joneses. Hell, I didn't even know the Joneses. I don't even know if I like the Joneses. But I found myself buying things that I didn't need with money I really didn't have to impress people I didn't even know. And just like anything, though, that we abuse or we hide, at some point, it rises to the surface. Then I had a change of heart. I drew a line in the sand, a stake in the ground, and I planted myself in this decision. No more hiding, no more pretending, just a resolve to be real, to reconcile, to understand, to forgive, to heal. Whew. I learned that when I'm not aligned with who I truly am, and the more and more I suppress the truth of who I really am, that's where I suffer. You see, I kept all my secrets and all the roles and the labels and the hidden insecurities tucked away in my head, but really in my heart. Talk about brain and heart coherence. And when that happens, it produces dis-ease. And the enormity of everything I was hiding started to show up in my body in the form of diabetes, neuropathy. I had triple bypass surgery, 8 eye surgeries that led to blindness in my left eye. 4 months later, learning I was in stage 5 chronic kidney disease and kidney failure. 3.5 years on dialysis while still traveling coast to coast in my corporate job. 10 donors, but no transplant. Finally, at the end of my rope, I received a transplant. But out of surgery, I suffered a heart attack. Now, to add to the medical issues I was experiencing, and upon returning to work from my transplant, learned that my job was eliminated and I was laid off from a company I served for 27 years. And then the last life event that truly reflected the death of my identity as I knew it, after everything I just shared with you, I was ending a 25-year marriage. And I'm here to talk to you about love is still the answer. So as I reflect on the tumultuous terrain of my path I had taken, it was obvious that there were numerous wake-up calls along the way. But I chose to press snooze on my hopes and dreams, snooze on how I really wanted to express myself, snooze on taking care of myself, snooze on my life. I needed a way out, get my head above water, just feel like everything was going to be okay. But like I said, don't feel sorry for me. I'm far from a victim. And like I mentioned before, my story is good. Little did I know that a conversation with my youngest daughter would spark this deep commitment to the work that I'm currently doing. After I had, I picked up my daughter from school, we went and had a sandwich, and we had this really cool conversation. I don't even remember the subject. What I remember is that I responded to her and I said, Bella, I don't know about you, but I would just want to be my true self. And just like kids do, she said, Dad, what's your true self? And I was like, and I was in a car, like waiting to leave a parking lot. And so I did. I said, this is what I told her. I said, when Dad was born, I was handed a name. I was given a nationality and a culture that, you're a Pacific Islanders. It's all about hanging loose, laid back. This is how we see the world. You're what's known as a Catholic. And I started to adopt and adapt my family's experiences without even choosing it myself. And that was my identity. But when I pull all those back and I look what remains, that is where I know I was made in the image and likeness of my source. Some call it the universe, some call it God, whatever you want to call it. It is the source that beats my heart, and that is love. Therefore, I am love. And it was right there in the car, and I'm like, damn, that's my true self. And when I don't look out of that lens, I suffer. So I made a commitment, and this was at the end of 2018, when there was election time going on. And all I heard was, there's a blue wave coming, there's a red wave coming. And I said, I'm going to start a love wave. Unity through diversity. Because what I envision is humanity in a circle where we can look each other in the eye and see and appreciate the physical differences and hear the differences. But what we celebrate are the commonalities, which I will guarantee you is love. And so I began to unfold this in an event called Love Wave Live. And I wanted to create this platform for diverse speakers and entrepreneurs and people who have found love in their life and how it has transformed them. And what was cool about it is I had 13 speakers, and each talk was, love your body, love your failures, love your purpose. And everyone was their own selves in their own lane, but the goal was the same, to give love center stage. And that's what I'm wanting to embody. So when I heard about what was happening with this platform, I knew that it's something that I attracted in my life, because it's not about competition. We're all drawing from the same source. It's to lock arm in arm for the good of humanity. Whew. Ultimately, it is to start that love wave with ripples within ourselves. Because when we can experience that unconditional look, and not just the things that we appreciate about ourselves, but those dark places, those dark things that we weren't necessarily, appreciative of, that we were proud of, that is a part of us, that wholeness, it automatically gives us not only permission, but it actually induces this compassion for others. We have no idea what they're going through and what their story is. And ultimately, that will result in a tsunami of love that will overtake this world. So ultimately, I know there are two things, right? Being an advocate and an ambassador of love in this life is what I do. But being a source of harmony, radical acceptance, and love without condition, that is who I am. And so it's just really heartwarming to align with, this organization and to be able to share this stage, to open up the world of possibilities. Because in my life, I know that I face that road and that fork in the road. There's either probabilities or possibilities, and I chose the possibility road. And what it started to unfold and to unravel is things that I couldn't even fathom in my own mind. So it's just a beautiful opportunity to bring me on a daily basis to the edge where I think I couldn't have done this myself. But when you have an intention to bring all the gifts, all the talents, all the experiences, both tragic and all, the awards and all my life experiences, it shapes me for something that will serve the world. And that's why I'm here right now in this moment. So once again, Matthew Abram, I appreciate the invitation. And with that, I wanted to say, with any question that you have in this life, I will guarantee you love is still the answer. Thank you.
Wow, Joe, that was so powerful. Like that blew me away. Like I acknowledge your heart, your passion, you are a force for love, and I could see why you went with a love wave, because I can feel it. Like it was like a tidal wave of just love, and I just acknowledge your courage and sharing your story and shining through all that story and being here on the other side and sharing it with us, letting others just be empowered by. So it's so inspiring. First of all, thank you for sharing. You said so many things that just resonated with my heart and my soul. Like one thing really stuck out is just something where you're talking about united through diversity, and that's something that's very personal for me, because it's even, I'll pull it up, that's even part of our mission that one day is bringing you and me and communities together to enjoy celebration, unifying humanity in our diversity to create a better world for us all. And it's, I wanted to kind of pick your brain further on that, because everything you said resonated so deeply with me, because I've always been amazed at the full spectrum of humans and perspectives and how, as humanity as a whole, has not lifted up the unique gifts and contributions
absolutely
of every culture and every community that would make us all better off.
Yeah, right. No, yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, Abram, because I already know that in a conversation with someone who I'm seeing differences, I get really curious. So for me, I want to know more. And so I in that conversation, it's not about me projecting my own beliefs and everything on them. It's being curious about them and being with them, not to respond, listening to respond, but really listening to understand. And because at the end of the day, I know we have differences. Let's discover the commonalities,
Right.
And it typically is in those uncomfortable conversations where I discover it.
Right.
So I'm willing to go to that uncomfortable place.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And I would actually, I mean, I would double down on that for myself. Like, I feel some of my biggest transformation in my life has been from me. I've learned my biggest lessons from people I haven't understood, or people that I disagreed with. And, and it's like that humility of just going up willingly, talking to people that I don't know, understand, or I don't agree with, or don't even know if I agree with, but I don't know where I stand, and just hearing other voices and not distinguishing them as wrong or bad or good. It's just seeing them as human. And what opens up is it's just a possibility of learning something, as opposed to just a dehumanizing of of the other.
Yes.
You also touched on so many things you said. I could talk with what you spoke about for a long time. But you also spoke about like hiding and wearing masks, and I also relate to that deeply. You know, a lot of my life I've hid in my own skin, and the irony of it is, I feel like the deepest fear is we don't know that it is. I didn't know that, but I felt my deepest fear in retrospect has been my authentic self. And it's like, and coming into that skin, and it's like, what will people think of me when I'm authentic? Like what you're saying, like, it's all about looking good. It's all about, avoid looking bad. And but I'm curious, just like, at what point, did you recognize not only your own power? I mean, because you went through a lot of what you went through, but at what point did you stop hiding it? Because you are shining right now. There's no hiding. I can tell. I don't see you that's hiding right now.
Yeah, I think is because throughout my career, even my corporate career, when I was a part of a religion which I no longer subscribe to, but the same things came to the surface. It was, I had the ability to help people discover their own greatness. And, I always had that ability to see right through their facades, actually. And it was because I saw through my own, but had the courage enough. And I was somewhat of a chameleon. I was a chameleon in my life. And, and it was because I didn't fit in when I was younger, and I found in my own work that the commonality is fear and experiences that we've had in our childhood. But as I look back, I find that the turning point for me was when I was 7 years old in the second grade. And back in the day, I'm dating myself, but marbles was the game, of that day. And I was good at it, right? So with me and my brothers, but I'd taken a long, like, white tube socks filled with all the kinds of marbles. And I was this chubby little dude. I just wanted people to like me. So I went out to the playground and I just yelled, "Marbles!" And I just started to throw them in the air, and I had everybody's attention like in a heartbeat. And dude, it was like mass mayhem. It was like money was falling from the sky. And everybody on that playground was just like scrambling for the marbles. And instantaneously, I was popular. And I knew this is how you receive love, is you buy it. Now, what the fuck would need to happen to a 7-year-old for them to come up with a strategy like that? I mean, I didn't know it with this 7-year-old mind, but as I look back on that, I used to have shame about that. But now I'm like, fuck, little Joe, you're amazing showing up in the way that you did. Unfortunately, what happened is it got worse and worse. I mean, it is magnified as I got older. And then I started to really feed the wound of no one will want me. And so we walk around with those wounds and we do the best that we can. And as that just followed in, I was a chameleon, I step on, a rock and it would turn another color so I could mirror the audience that was in front of me. And then I started to do personal growth work after actually I got married. And then I began to have the courage to come out of hiding and to look at those things that I was afraid to look at. And it's been a continued journey, but I had to reconcile with little Joe back then, and really give him props. He did the best that he could. And that was really me today. So, and then layers and layers continued to come off. I would go back into hiding and performing and, being someone that others expected me to be. So I was more saving my reputation than I was showing my true authentic self. So now, as I've stepped into that, I have noticed that people have withdrawn, or they go, "Oh wow, we didn't know that about you," or those types of dynamics, and it actually has brought a lot of freedom in my life, and so yeah, and I would say, especially in the last 10 years or so, have been this continued permission to evolve and to really show up authentically. So yeah,
Powerful. I love that journey. I really, really appreciate that. This thing that keeps coming up in multiple conversations, not just with you, but with a lot of people that I meet, is the conditioning that takes place in our society.
Yeah.
And like, you're pointing to this in almost everything you're saying, right? Like, we give up so much to be someone that fits, to be someone that belongs in the world as it exists today.
Yeah.
And I get this sense, I don't know how true it is, because I can't actually talk to people like Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump or, Nancy Pelosi or whoever it is that's pulling the imaginary strings. But I get this weird sense that a lot of what they're doing to try to maintain the status quo because they have given up so much of what they really are to create it.
100%. 100%. It's funny, man. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, like, I keep what you were about to say in mind, and okay. But also, like, the question I have is what did you gain, not just in health, but in like, I'll just leave it. Like, what did you gain up to your own interpretation? Like, what did you gain in letting go of all of the BS that you were taught to be, and actually start becoming what you actually are?
Yeah, what I gained was this new appreciation of who I am. I did a lot of mirror work, and it was tough for me even to look in a fucking hand mirror, and this idea, it sounded weird. I mean, my girls hear me talking to myself all the time, but as I do it now audibly versus in my head, there's a lot of power in that. And so what I gained was this freedom to actually stop performing, because I was always the positive dude, the guy who was like, bring the spirits up of everybody. And I never could really like be okay with just being down or like feeling like, man, I feel like a piece of shit. That could never come out of my mouth. So it gave me the freedom to be, right? Just to be. And I started to really appreciate like the resilience that I had. And now as I talk to myself, it's like, damn, Joe, it's like, I appreciate how you're tackling your life. I appreciate that you show up the way that you do. I appreciate how real you are with yourself, and I have that conversation every day, not the same exact one, but, I've learned this practice to able to not be uncomfortable hearing myself speak to myself. And then the idea of unabashedly being who I am, so yeah, that was my gain.
And what was it you were about to say? Like, what was funny?
What was funny when we were talking about Trump and McConnell, it's like, I see them as little boys. I really do.
Yeah.
And it's like, the irritating things, at least from my experience, the things that they say and do, I get super curious about their childhood. I mean, because it is. I mean, that it is a product of what's being emulated out. And so I protect my energy based upon what's coming out, and it turns into compassion. It's like, if, when those things come into my life where I'm either triggered or it's like I'm set off, I'm cool with that. But at the end of the day, it's like, oh, this is just an opportunity for me to practice.
Right.
I get to practice this thing, right, called love. How can I have love for this dude that is like bringing division just with a sentence, you know? And then I find like, man, probably one of the most injured and hurt, you know, he exudes power, but he's the most powerless, you know, because he's not aware. So, yeah. So when you said that, that's funny.
It's powerful, Joe. I want to turn to our second guest in a moment here and bring you back. But I just want to say what you were just saying about, you know, 7-year-old Joe. And I mean, I've had similar experiences with 5-year-old Abram, you know, where I wouldn't accept. But what I was gaining from what you said is like a lot of the times, as you know, 5, 7, 9, as a youngin, what we perceive as protecting ourselves from failure is actually stunting growth. It's like that mindset. It's like I can't do this because people are going to think I look bad, and people are going to think so. We perceive that as protecting ourselves. It's really protecting our identity. It's protecting that illusion, and it's like failure is the biggest teacher. It is like, and it's like, but we don't know that. No, it's like we don't know that until we get that, and that's it's powerful. What you're saying, just as a 7-year-old, you know, it's like when you were that age, like, you thought that was protecting yourself from failure, and
totally.
And I think that's very powerful. I really, really appreciate it. That was amazing, your share. I love listening to you speak, and you have such powerful words, Joe. I would love for you to come back and share with us again soon.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the time, you guys.
Absolutely. We're going to check back in with Joe in a little bit. We're going to have our second guest. Sounds good. Just want to check in with all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. That was an amazing share. I had the goosebumps for a while. But I want to take this time to really invite you to share an opportunity. Share your gift. This space is here for you to share your unique gift, your unique genius. We all have something that, you know, within us that is something much bigger than us. And we all have something that we have to contribute to us all. And I want to give you this space to share yourself, because when you are expressed in the gift that you are, it helps me, it helps my neighbor, it helps everybody. We all have a gift to share, especially when we come from that space like Joe was sharing. It's like when we are willing to be vulnerable and to share ourselves authentically, especially about where we've been inauthentic, especially where we've been, like, if we can see that within ourselves and see, despite that story, despite the mask that we feel are protecting us, you have something beautiful to share. And I want to offer you just the space to do it, and with love and with compassion and with acceptance. That's what this space is for. So we invite you to share. Go to the link at the bottom of the screen there, and that's part of what our mission is at One Day, which I shared earlier. It's bringing you and me and communities together in joyous celebration, unifying humanity and our diversity, Joe, to create a better world for us all. And that's why we're doing this. We're doing one conversation at a time. We all have something to share, and when we can see, connect the dots, you know, the division and the conversations of separateness are just an illusion. So now I'd like to invite our second guest. I'm really excited to have Kevin E. West. Kevin, thank you for joining us, man.
My pleasure, fellas. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we are excited to have you.
I got to follow Joe. That's
good luck with that.
Right.
That didn't seem fair. He was great.
Well, I'm really excited to have you, Kevin. I'm just going to let you have at it. So, Kevin, without further ado, the stage is yours.
Oh, okay. Very good. My conversation today, and Matthew and Abram, you had brought this up before we started today, was that somehow it's always interesting how these conversations dovetail into one another between the two people that you have on. And there's no question that what Joe talked about would absolutely dovetail into what I would like to discuss today, because unifying because of diversity and being more unified with our diversity is absolutely a theme that we should all face. And I go back to, we have to discuss how we got to where we are in our lives, because we all know it. And a lot of what I want to share with everybody today has to do with communication. I happen to be someone, again, much like Joe, I don't want anybody to feel sorry for me. I grew up in a one-parent home. And basically about from the time I was 11 years old, I pretty much raised myself, was pretty much alone most of the time. And one of the keys about that is how we create our own self-identity in those times, because I always felt, which is odd, if you look at me physically, I always felt like a misfit. And I indeed grew up being a chameleon. And yet, the inside of my household was not particularly positive. And what we don't realize when we're younger is how much that shapes the way we eventually, as time goes by, learn to communicate. And in the place we are in the world right now, when you look at what Joe said about love, when you look at the desire to unify where we're at, and you look at the stage, since this is one day and this is a stage, the stage that we're currently on in this country, the things that actually bring people together are communication. Because the irony is, you guys, that we spend more time now expressing ourselves through digital technology, but how much do we genuinely communicate? I had a household in which I was communicated to by basically my mother, threatening to blow her brains out if I didn't take the trash out. I wish that were a joke. It isn't. And whether we realize it or not, we all have had those forms of those things. The 10-year-old Abram, the 5-year-old Matthew, the 10-year-old me, the 5-year-old Joe, the 7-year-old Joe. We all have those stories, but we don't realize how much it's affected how much we communicate today. And as much as I desire desperately, being somebody who grew up in rural Tennessee, who has now come all the way through his life, through college athletics, all the way out to Los Angeles, and have spent 3 decades on television, going to the core truth of who you are, the core answer of who you are. And we spend almost every moment of our day in some way constantly texting or calling, and we spend a lot of time communicating. But I wonder often how much we actually communicate. We express a lot. We don't necessarily communicate. And it's one of the things that we face. I mean, George Bernard Shaw had just the greatest quote of all time. The problem with communication is the illusion that it's actually taken place. And in the self-search for who you are, your surroundings, your life, what makes up the cycles and the pictures of your life often come through your communication. Because I was someone who, I grew up in a relatively uneducated part of the world, and I don't really know how proficient my communication skills were when I was younger. I was a smart ass. I was a comic. I was a goofball. And slowly over time, because I got into psychology, I eventually began to do sort of what Joe mentioned, was look in the mirror, like all of us do at a time in our lives. And where we face right now, what we have going on in this world at this moment is such a massive degree of change and fear that it runs our communication more than we realize. I kind of like to live my life by the 4 agreements, which people may or may not know, but the 4 agreements are: be impeccable with your word, don't assume, don't take things personally, and always do your best. Now, those 4 sound simple, but they aren't. And I'm going to focus mostly on the first one: be impeccable with your word, but also do your best. Because doing your best for me, because of the misfit background that I had, became one of the biggest challenges in my life. And when you are thrown into sudden change, and the easiest thing that maybe a lot of us can get used to or have an analogy to is having to move schools when you were a kid and be the new kid in school, and that feeling that everybody was looking at you but nobody knew you, and how we have to adjust to that, how we have to acquiesce and join the tribe in our jobs and just assimilate constantly. And yet the reality is we still learn to communicate from a very, very early age in the environment we grew up in. And I have found that for the most part in our lives, we never really necessarily get any better at our internal evolving communication skills. And one of the most important things we can do to try and bring this world together, the United States of America, more together in the incredibly fractured place that we live in, is communication. We have that bumper sticker that says, think globally, act locally. And bring that all the way down to not just act locally, where you live, but within your own family, under your own roof, in your own relationship, in terms of becoming a better communicator, because I accidentally founded an organization and ran it for 23 and a half years, and it caused about 5,000 people to come through it from all over the world, everywhere. And through the course of that organization, and because people are artists and they're goofy and crazy and subjective and unpredictable, and those are the personalities that you get, I had to learn how poor my communication was and how much better it needed to get. We have a lot of cliches that we say, hey, I said what I meant. Yeah, but you didn't mean what you say. Or I meant what I said, but you didn't say what you meant. And that's part of what George Bernard Shaw was saying. I want to be a part of the unification, the coming together, the better understanding of all forms of different types of people, all forms of different ideologies and backgrounds. And it starts with how we communicate, which also includes how we listen. But if you start with being impeccable with your word, I'm hoping that it creates a couple of different things for everybody, because my mother didn't know how to communicate. She still doesn't. She's 80 years old. She simply doesn't. It's not something she ever learned. So when we have to spend time trying to guess what people mean, think of the way we're communicating these days. Aside from all of the outlets that we get on our phone, just all of the social media and the texting, like I said, there's a lot of expression, there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of argument. What I don't see is I don't see a lot of communication. I don't see people responding with any form of understanding or consideration for where the other person may be coming from. And as much as we can rally around, and we can certainly hold and go, like Joe said, lock arm in arm, I encourage all of us to spend more time trying to get better at how we communicate. And I have a couple of words that go along with that, because this is a tough journey for us, especially in the place that we are now. It's simplicity and specificity, because part of my journey, part of what happened with my life, and it's not uncommon for a lot of people, because we have a lot of social anxiety in the world now, certainly with what's going on in the place that we are. It's not gotten better. The situation in the world has, with viruses and such, and politics and everything else, has made it harder. What's happened with me is I woke up one day without realizing it, and I had a severe perfectionism complex, never allowing myself to make a mistake, making sure that I always was a chameleon, that I made sure that I fit in everywhere, that I never said anything that would upset anybody or really cause a rift, because I wasn't necessarily sure how to handle it. And communication skills and understanding that what evolves out of us, for the most part, is something we learned by the time we were 5 or 6. And I'm not talking about learning education. I'm not talking about learning fancy words or the ability to give a presentation. I'm talking about what evolves out of you in every circumstance, sometimes planned, sometimes on short notice, sometimes in a dramatic or chaotic circumstance. That's a lot of what's going on in the world. And communication is something that is the basis and foundation for all forms of coming together, all forms of omnipotent love, so that we actually look and we actually see and we actually listen and then communicate. And 3 of the things that I've developed over the years for myself that really affect communication are audience, environment, and intent. It's my thing. It's the journey of communication. Because what you say to one person, even if it's the same exact words, probably should be said differently to somebody who's a different audience on a given day. And the environment you're in, like on your phone or on social media, it's not the same as even talking through an electronic mechanism like I'm doing right now, but at least having a video screen. Email is not the same. And the intent with what you're trying to say is where communication really fails. We sometimes don't get to the place where we truly say exactly what we mean. And therefore, what I call the grand illusion happens because it's the illusion that communication is actually taking place. I'm a big advocate, if you guys want to look at communication, is we're all storytellers. It doesn't matter how boring the story is. It doesn't matter. We're telling a story. Once upon a time, in every single response we have. And it caused me to realize that as I got older, I was not as aware of my perfectionism complex as I thought I was. And I didn't realize how damaging it was. And it's something that I'm witnessing every single day. It's something I'm witnessing for the last 2 decades of how much it is actually completely anathema to the idea of us being more unified, coming together, solving problems together, is knowing how we go about speaking and to whom, when, and why. And took me a long time to finally understand that I don't have to be perfect to be outstanding. But one of the ways that I get there, one of the ways I get through tough times, anxiety, is simplify things and be really specific. If you are struggling to try and find something like what Joe was talking about, then bring yourself all the way down to the most simple thing that you know you like, the most simple thing that you know makes you feel safe, the most simple thing that you know brings you joy and laughter. And understand that when you communicate, maybe spend more time being very, very cognitive of the simple idea of who is my audience? Where am I? Because a conversation in a big room, when we're finally back in them one day, and the conversation, privately in a library, still not the same conversation. And as long as your intent, one of my 3 favorite words is sincerity of purpose, then a lot more communication can occur as opposed to just constant expressing ourselves by which people just keep missing and keep missing and keep misunderstanding. And you finally wake up and realize that for as hard as I try and for as hard as I've worked hard in my life to be a really, really good person, at the end of the day, if I don't truly understand how to communicate to you, then there's a very good chance that I'm going to miss actually who you are. And I'm going to be busy just running my mouth or just running my fingers. And I'm not going to really hear your communication coming back to me. And it's been a really long journey for me through the rural South, all the way to Hollywood and dealing. That's why sometimes people call me the Hollywood redneck, because you have very, very, very different forms of industries and people all over this world. In communication and being really good at it is one of those things that can either cause us to hide from the public, hide from ourselves, and or cause you to actually not hear, because fear, ego, and envy really drives a lot of our communication. And it's an imperative thing for us to spend a little more time on, in my opinion, to try and unify in our smallest of ways, in our house, to simply be better with all of the unification we can possibly have, from our jobs to our careers to our personal family and our personal lives. Because a lot of us have a perfectionism complex, and you don't have to be perfect to be outstanding. But I want you to be heard when you communicate, and I want people to actually understand. And that's what I came here today to share.
Thank you, Kevin. That was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. That was you brought up so many things that I could touch on. Just particularly just in the communication, paradigm. I've discovered myself there's a lot. The biggest part in communication is the space in which we listen from. If I listen to you and if I'm listening to you, and before I even hear you, I have a preconceived notion that you are this or you are that. You are like some label that that's predetermined in my subconscious. It's like I'm not actually talking to you. We're actually communicating. I'm just hearing my label, and I'm not really there's no opportunity to actually connect because there's a filter, there's a mask, there's a block, and I think it's powerful to recognize.
Well,
that.
I mean, one of the first, I mean, who are the first authority figures we have in our lives? They're our parents, whether you have one, two, whether it was your grandmother, and then that authority figure eventually in our lives gets transferred over and over to every authority figure we have going forward. Sometimes it may be a coach, it may be a teacher. Eventually, it may be your boss. And if we never reconcile and deal with how we evolve, and I'm not even going down the road of like certain amount of therapy, I'm going down a certain amount of why I just said, who's your audience? Because if you have an internal reaction to somebody who's your boss, similar in terms of the way it comes out of your mouth, that somehow was like the dad or mother you had that you didn't get along with, then there's a strong possibility that your communication and relationship with that person is going to be affected in a way that's just completely unnecessary. And I'm even saying it from the global standpoint of unifying what we're talking about, because the awesome thing about digital technology is that this globe could see Abram and Matthew doing this show, this one-day stage of, but if people don't communicate well about it, then the idea of it winds up getting lost or missed. And communication, being better at it, being a better listener, in a lot of ways, not only saved me, but also allowed me to get where I've gotten today. And it just took me a long time to realize that the nuance of communication was such an important part of something we don't recognize, and how it evolves out of us from all of this old learned stuff we have. And we sometimes don't even see the person in front of us that we're talking to.
Right. Absolutely. There's it makes me think of, how, because we're on when people are talking, like someone could say I love you and the other hears I hate you. Someone could say, like, the intent is not always heard, and I feel like that's cleared up in the space we listen from. When we can see the person we're talking to as human, someone might be acting out, they might be angry, maybe they're even violent, but if we identify them as, you're just an angry person, or you're just if we sum them up as their actions, we're not seeing them as who they are. We're seeing them as the pain and the toxicity. So I guess my thought or question is, like, how in this ever-changing, growing, expanding, ever-connected world, how does one communicate universally or individually when, in this world, every other person we might be coming from a different vantage point?
I would say that one of the most important words with really omnipotent communication starts with the consideration of who your audience is. We use the word considerate, but I don't think a lot of times that our communications actually consider. We spend our time really just trying to make sure we make our point. Mm-hmm. I just want to make sure I make my point.
Right.
It's like if all you're going to do is try and make your point, then you are technically in ways, and this is coming from a guy who had to sort of fight his way through life, being a misfit and being somebody who didn't have a dad at the ball game, and being somebody who grew up in a part of the world, especially then, that was extraordinarily racist and extraordinarily closed-minded. And I look the way I look, and I knew that I didn't fit. I knew it by the time I was 12 years old. So we're busy oftentimes making our point, and it doesn't allow us to listen and consider. And that's why the audience and the environment matters so much to me. Because if you don't really take time to consider, then I think it lends itself to the fact that one of the things we don't do very often, Abram and Matthew, is we don't ask why enough. When somebody states where they're from or states what they want to do, we don't oftentimes say, why do you feel that way? Where did that come from? We don't inquire, and that's a form of consideration. And if we spent more time in this universe trying to unify one another across the globe by considering somebody else's, there's so many cliches of, like, you don't know what somebody's struggle is, you don't know where they've been. It doesn't mean that sometimes you're not going to simply agree to mutually disagree, but we don't spend a lot of time, I think, actually truly communicating. And it's because of fear, ego, and envy. I have a little thing that I talk about called the selfie. It's not taking a picture of yourself, SELFEE. And fear, ego, and envy drive a lot of our communication, and ultimately it winds up being what we said earlier. It's the 5-year-old Abram or the 7-year-old Joe or the 10-year-old Kevin that really winds up saying more than actually the person who's sitting there who knows I'm an adult, you're an adult, let's have a conversation. I hear people say it all the time. I've heard it so much for the last 2 decades. I hear people say, well, I'm kind of non-confrontational. And I feel like that we've taken confrontation and brought it all the way down to literally saying something that I simply don't agree with or don't want to hear. And I think that it's destroying unity in this world, and certainly in the United States. The ability to have a healthy disagreement or a healthy conversation where you're not exactly on the same page comes down to how we communicate. And it's heartbreaking to see all the time, because I live in Hollywood, man. Everyone thinks if you order a different kind of coffee, you're being it's a confrontation. That should have been a lot funnier. But we have to be willing to understand that people are very, very different, and we have to communicate considering such. And you have to make an effort. This is not something you're just going to learn. We all learned how to communicate a long time ago. We learned our language, but we don't necessarily learn how to actually understand how communication comes out of us and then to whom we're speaking. And it's doing more damage than I think we realize.
I can see that. I love that like consideration of your audience, because to me it points to something even much deeper, which is recognizing the similarities in that other person. Like when you consider your audience, it automatically inhibits anything that you had that was preconceived about them. All right, like, and this goes to one of the other of the four agreements, which is don't take anything personally. Like,
it's the hardest one for sure.
Yeah,
it's the hardest one for sure. We're human, man. We're human.
And we feel and we hurt and we want to protect ourselves, and we want to avoid pain. And in order to avoid pain, we do all these things. Like we build these comforts around us, and we do, like, we create this crazy world that's so out of balance that we live in, all to avoid pain, it seems like. But like, that consideration of others, asking that question, why, what, and where, like, where is this coming from? What are you really saying? Why are you reacting the way you're reacting? It offers an invitation to let go of those preconceptions, and in recognizing like how much of my own preconception exists, it becomes it became very easy for me not to take anything personally, because I recognize that 90% of what I used to say was based on what I thought that other person was, not who they actually are.
Yeah. I mean, again, we're always going to have, we always use the word profile, I think, in the wrong way. We've been profiling people since we were 3 years old. It's a normal thing that human beings do. The difference is, of course, to what degree do you profile? And absolutism and extremism doesn't work in the human space in certain ways. And that's a lot of what I hear people do, especially, in social media, is they're extraordinarily absolute about something that is completely subjective. And that may be the best freezer burn of all time. But I mean, it's a non sequitur. I want to see as the core of what part of what Joe said about, and what's in your tagline of unification. It's hard to unify if you have created a form of absolutism in your head about what someone's opinion is or where they're from. Before you even speak to them, you have to be willing to at least be reasonable. And if your communication doesn't allow for someone to continue to want to speak with you, even at your job, then you're going to have a tough time with not only being a part of anything, but you're certainly going to have a tough time engaging in general society. And being reasonable goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're saying about absolutism, I actually want to bring Joe in on this as well. Let's bring Joe in on it. But what you're just saying about absolutism, this is welcome back, Joe. For me, it goes back to like Socrates. He's like, all I know is that I don't know. And as humans, if we, as individuals or collectively or as culture, feel we have all the answers, and it's just like, I see that we're in trouble, because it's like if as a limited human on this one rock in an infinite universe, it's like I figured it all out in my head, I have the answers, it's all up here. Don't matter. Don't have to share with. I don't have to hear what anyone else has to say. I've got it figured out. And it's like all there is truth, wisdom, and wonder and beauty, and in manifesting like the greatest experiences of reality can be understood and comprehended in our mind is a distraction from if we feel like we know, I feel like we've already lost. If we feel like we know, and it's coming from that space of not knowing that we can accept people, especially the people that are different than us, especially the people we disagree with, especially the people we don't understand. And I want to just touch on that, because it is for me, I know objectively I can learn something from everybody in this world, every single person, whether it's a lesson or a blessing. I can learn something from everybody, but I never. But what you were saying about absolutism is when we think we have all the answers, like this is the way and only I know, I understood, like if it's scripture or not, it's like I know God told me specifically this is exactly what he meant. He didn't mean what that person said. He meant exactly what I think. And like I just wanted, what are your thoughts on the state of the world and absolutism? And I want to give you two a chance to connect as well.
Well, I appreciated what you said about who was it? Socrates, you said?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's real comforting and a space coming from that. What's interesting for me, and Kevin, as you were sharing, this is just beautiful synchronicities of our messages, how they've sewn together today. I think it's pretty fascinating. What I learned is that a beautiful way to practice the idea of being with someone is the loss of empathy. In fact, I have, a t-shirt line, and my t-shirt is going to say, "Make empathy great again." It is that idea to be with them. And there's an old indigenous practice. I'm sure you guys are aware of the talking stick, right? And then when someone has a talking stick, no one else in the circle is to comment, make any facial or body, inflections. They are to be with the person that is talking. There is no discussion afterwards. But it's to be with. And empathy is the practice of feeling, right? No response. We don't have to fix. We don't have to argue. And I fostered that with my daughters. And there's many times the dad in me wants to come out. And I started to see perspective of their own experience and why they derive to their own belief system. I may not agree with it, but what it does is it gives them the stage, right? Here it is. Because when someone's performing on the stage, we don't interrupt and say, "No, sing that note a little different." It's like, it's that idea. So what would happen if we created that within our own relationships and also formally within, whether it be workshops or the work that we do? And I know for me, it's been that bridge to practice the idea of listening to understand versus listening to respond, right? And Kevin, can I steal the selfie? That was amazing, dude. I love that. Fear, envy, and ego.
Yep.
So yeah, that's
we don't realize a lot of times, especially with electronic communication. Certainly, it happens in person and it happens within people that we are very familiar with, not necessarily strangers, but I don't think we realize sometimes that a lot of what we butt up against the wall when trying to communicate with somebody that may have a different ideology or a different belief system is we do not realize how much as human beings we desperately need to cling to that which makes us feel safe. And Joe and I, you and I have gone through, because we are older than the other two fine gentlemen, we have gone through, and not that you guys haven't gone through a lot in the time you've been on the planet so far. I hope your next 25 are easier than but we do cling to that which makes us feel comfortable and safe. It's important for human beings, and I think what we don't recognize sometimes that would make us better communicators and listeners and be more empathetic is to realize a lot of the belief system and ideology and the rigidity that comes out of people's mouths comes from a place that they're extraordinarily scared they'll never show it. It may not even be a part of the very conversation they're having, but that's the underneath part of what I said about the organic journey of communication, which is my thing. How it comes out of us and why it comes out from there is that their belief system that they're spewing out at you is coming from a place that they have to stay within that because it keeps them feeling safe. And if you're going to try not to break that down, but to try and understand it and communicate with it, you're going to likely have to choose different words and choose a different way about going about communicating, because there's a lot of fear, ego, and envy that's based on why people communicate the way they do.
Yeah. And Kevin, if I could comment to that, I think you said a word that is important in communication is people feeling safe.
Yeah.
Right. That they can truly express how they feel, and to me, it's about trust. And so in terms of communication, if I don't have trust in the other party, I'm most likely aren't going to listen to what they have to say, but I'm going to spew everything that I believe. So if I'm facilitating conversation between two people, it is the idea of trust is really credibility, reliability, intimacy, into you I see, into me you see, and motive. Because as soon as I distinguish, your motive is just to, debunked what I'm saying, we're not going to have a conversation. There's no communication. It is what you said, Kevin, is this idea of we're just going to, we don't want to seek to understand. But if we can just have a little bit of framework before we discuss and just say, hey, I want to have this discussion with you. Can I just come like with a palms up type of approach to say, I want to seek to understand, and what I'm going to ask and what I need is for you to really hear me out what I'm saying, and let's discuss this. Right. We don't take the time to even framework it because we're so busy wanting to just speak, right? So that they can understand where we're coming from.
Yeah, the audience environment intent. If your intent is only to be heard and your intent is not to understand why someone believes this,
right.
It's going to be a challenge for us to get any closer together as human beings.
Absolutely. And the other day I had a talk with my buddy, and he was pretty passionate about a social, topic right now. And he was like, you can tell energetically, he was just coming out of himself. And he was challenging me in some of the things I had shared. And I just asked him, I said, hey, I just want to know, are you going to die on this hill? Is this one that you're, and he said, yes. I said, okay, conversation is done in terms of that topic. So let's move past that to say, what's the answer? Because ultimately, if there's no desire to seek to understand, not to, agree, but to understand, then it's okay if we stop the conversation.
Yep.
Let's move past that, because I think we want the same thing, but maybe our approaches are a little bit different. So what would you say is the answer to this? And so it started a whole different conversation that evolved into this. Okay, I see you, and like, I feel you. And instead of walking away, like with the cancel culture that we have, it's like, oh, you believe this? Unfollow, right? And it's like, no. It's just like you said, asking the why. And I always ask, what about that really charges you? And that's where the curiosity comes at. It's like, I'm feeling that passion, man. So tell me about that. I'm really curious. Tell me more.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to listen.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to acknowledge what they say.
I'm always desperately curious to understand how somebody developed the belief system and the opinions that they have.
Yeah.
I very much want someone to tell me why it is they believe what they believe. It's interesting across the course of my life how often when you actually give someone the stage they think they already have, and you give them and say, great. It's very funny how sometimes they suddenly realize that they don't actually have that developed in their lives. They have that developed by the time they were 12, because that's what went on in the environment they grew up in. And they've never adjusted it or considered anybody else all the way through. And that's why I'm happy to give somebody the stage with a simple, specific piece of communication of, great, share with me why it is you have that opinion and where it came from.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So
I learned so much.
We're running a bit short on time, but I would love to jump back to something that, Joe, you just brought up, and that's trust.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have this feeling, and this is just based on my own experience, that like absolute trust in someone else is either impossible and or it comes down to my experiences of learning to trust that thing that is bigger than me. Like, call it intuition, call it the Holy Spirit, call it God, call it universe, call it love, whatever. But in everything that I've been through where I have looked back and recognized that, oh, this was a lot easier because I followed this weird little pull from this deep core place that I don't even have a proper name for other than just intuition or love.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I don't follow that, life is much more difficult. And so when I pay attention to that in conversation, it kind of becomes this automatic bullshit detector. Like when someone tells me, yeah, I'm going to do this, I can tell if they're serious about it or not. And if that bullshit detector says, no, they're not going to do it, I immediately start making other plans if that's something that I really feel needs to be done.
Yeah.
And so like the trust for me isn't in the other person, it's in that deeper knowing. And it's not a mental thing, it's not like, it's much more empathic and compassionate and just loving.
Absolutely.
I like the fact that you're loving about letting someone not be genuine with what they say.
Right.
That's a pretty good gift. It's hard to do, Matthew. It's hard to do.
It's hard when I'm attached to a particular outcome.
Voila. Voila. See, intent. That's why intent is in what I say, because what intention, it can also be need and desire. So yeah.
Yeah. And in listening to understand what you guys are talking about, often the outcome that I was attached to becomes irrelevant.
Yep.
Wow. I wanted to, before we finish, I wanted to ask both of you the same question. This is a question we're asking for a while, but our tagline for one day is today. And the question I'm going to ask both of you is, what does one day mean to you? And the context of that question is this: a lot of the time in communication and in society, we'll use the term one day as a future expression. One day I'll be happy. One day I'll get along with my mom. One day I'll have this, I'll have that. And at the same time, cast it in the future and avoid responsibility with any part in that said future. And that's why our tagline is one day is today. It is a way of being today. It's not a someday maybe, but not now. It is a right now experience. And I just wanted to extend that question to each of you. Starting with you, Kevin, what does one day mean to you?
One day is actually something that I said in what I had expressed, was that I have been working unconsciously and then consciously for probably close to 37 years on truly being at peace with the fact that you can be outstanding without having to be perfect. And from a self-identity standpoint, with a lot of what Joe expressed in his time, that allows me to do all things that I do in my life, all people that I engage, and everything that I spend every moment of my mortal life achieving a closer place of harmony to, it's okay to be outstanding without having to be perfect. It allows my one day to be today.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Kevin.
Sure.
How about you, Joe? What does one day mean to you?
I was supposed to follow that. I mean, come on. I would say that when I first learned of, the organization, I went on and read a little bit more, and instantaneously when I read that, one day is today, it brought me to the idea of present moment, and that's really all that I am, is this moment right here, right now. That's it. And so it's so powerful, man. You can unpack that so many different ways. So for me in this moment, I would say that one day is today means that, I get to choose, right, who I am and how I want to be in the world. So that's it for me.
Beautifully said. And one day we live by choice rather than chance.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love it. Well, I really appreciate both of you sharing. This has been an amazing conversation, and as I told you, it always comes back full circle without us even trying. It's really been an honor, and I'm so grateful to have both of you. And I love for you both to come back and share again with us soon. It's just been an honor for me because your perspectives, your stories, your passion, your authenticity, it inspires me, and I know it's valuable for me to hear you and to experience you sharing, but also I know our audience as well. So thank you so much, Joe and Kevin.
Thank you again.
Thank you all.
Awesome to be here. Take care.
And
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all our viewers for tuning in and hanging out with us. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm always thrilled. I'm always energized after we do this. But just thank you all for joining us. I want to again invite you and encourage you to share on this space and this stage. This is here for you. This is here for you to share the gift that you are. Even if you're not even sure, like, do I even have a gift? Like, most of my life, that was me. And, it is the fact that you're asking, the fact that you feel there's something bigger. It's that conversation, and that we want to invite you to share who you are. What is it that who are you now? But what have you faced? What are you facing? What are you overcoming to share the beauty that you are, to contribute the gift that you are to us all? And, and we're standing in our vision here at One Day. What our vision is humanity rising in a connected world with each person's unique contributions being valued and magnified through a higher level of collaboration, producing unprecedented new realms of possibility. And this is the vision that we have that's being held, which is beautiful people like Kevin and Joe. And I love you all. We'll see you on Thursday with another amazing set of guests. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you on Thursday. Thank you again to Joe and to Kevin. See you all next time.